If you want a ton of creative decks to try out with the new mini set coming out, you've come to the right place. I'm going to give you 5 to 7 decks to try out, depending on how many I think are actually good in my theory craft phase. So the first one is going to be a big Spell Mage. So obviously the idea of this deck is to play big spells, whether it be normally off of the Clumsy Courier or recasting a big spell off of the Grey Sage Parrot. Now the only reason I run 3 big spells, Deep Freeze, Mask of Cthulhu, and Arcane Overflow, is because the other spells just don't fit. Flame Strike is only good into some matchups, and I could potentially get off of any of my other resource generating cards, which I'll get into in a second. Refreshing Springwater, there aren't enough spells in the deck to make this work. Grand Finale, there aren't enough elementals to make this work. And Apexis Blast, we run minions, which makes all these cards feel clunky, but these 3 felt pretty good to me. Let's talk about how we get to this stage of the game, the late game. That is with your minions. Almost every single minion in this deck either generates you resources or draws you a card. The only cards that don't do that are the Imprisoned Observer, which is just a good removal. It's a way to potentially control the board, slow the opponent down a little bit, especially into an aggro matchup. And the Astromancer Solarian, which is just to give you a prime for an extra late game win condition. Other than that, every single card either draws you a card or generates you resources. And then I put Ring Toss in here because getting 2 secrets can be really nice, and it'll be pretty easy to corrupt considering you have so many later game cards. And then Jandice is just a really good turn 6 play. I feel like a lot of people forgot about her, but I run her in this deck because I think it's good. Obviously, the biggest issue with this deck is, will it have enough late game cards to have an actual win condition, and can this survive the pressure of an early aggro deck? Only time will tell. I'll tweak this deck as we go, but this is the initial build that I have right now. So obviously the next one has to be Quest Warrior, because everything that's coming out in this mini set is pirate based, or parrot, but same basic thing. Overall, this deck was already really good, and it's just going to get better. I decided to take out the Barov and Rancor a lot of people ran in the more control version, and replaced it with 2 more aggressive cards. Obviously the Defias Cannoneer, which is the 3-mana 3/3 that does basically the 2 damage cannonball twice thing every time you attack, and then Mr. Smite, which is just an absolutely overpowered card that is going to give Quest Warrior another insane finisher, which is just absurd. So overall, this deck is going to run very similarly to just normal Tempo Warrior, except it'll have an even more consistent late game win condition, and an even better mid game because the Defias Cannoneer is kinda broken. So the next deck on this list was inspired by somebody who messaged me on Discord, and they said, hey Ecor, what if you take Handoff Paladin and try to pump up the only charge minion in the game as much as possible, and then try to kill him in 1 hit? And I was like, wait, that's actually not a bad idea. Worst case scenario, great content, and you guys will have a good time trying to pull it off, so I decided to make a deck for it. I ended up taking out 3 cards to make this deck, obviously, because I needed to put in Mr. Smite, and then I also wanted to put in 2 copies of the new card Righteous Defense, because it allows you to potentially pump up the minions in your hand a little bit more. And we have ourselves a Mr. Smite OTK hand buff Paladin deck. So the next deck on this list is a Proving Grounds Demon Hunter deck. Basically summon 2 minions from your deck and they fight. So the reason why I am not putting this in a big Demon Hunter, as you can probably tell it's more of a Deathrattle style, is because I realize that if you summon 2 big demons out, yes, you can cheese out 2 big demons, but they're probably going to kill each other or make them go down to 1 or 2 HP, which I didn't like. So what I decided to do was put it in a Deathrattle Demon Hunter deck. So you have 2 main cases, right, that will probably happen. And as you get 2 Deathrattle minions, which still gets you value, right? Their Deathrattles trigger and you'll be fine. Or you'll get something like Illidari Inquisitor and another Deathrattle minion. So you'll get a good trigger, and you'll get an Illidari Inquisitor on the board, and if you have a weapon already out there, boom, next thing you know, that was loud, I apologize, but that was kind of cool. Anyway, you have an Illidari Inquisitor, you have a weapon, you slam him for 8 more damage, and you're able to get rushed in. It's just insane value on turn 6 potentially, and in order to put them in, I took out the Watch Posts, because they're cards that I've personally not been a fan of for a while. I feel like into the matchups they're supposed to do well into, they just never really quite did it for me. But if you want to take out something else, you totally can. You could potentially take out a Skull of Gul'dan to put in Watch Post again, maybe take out 1 Fell Rattler because some versions only run 1 copy. There are things you can do to change it around, but this is the build that I personally wanted to go with because I think it's going to be the best. Overall, Deathrattle Demon Hunter was already a really strong deck, and I think it's only going to be stronger with the ability to cheese out Illidari Inquisitors more consistently. So the next deck on this list is going to be Murloc Shaman, which I am actually pretty excited for. Obviously, it runs the same build as my last Murloc Shaman with the Lady Prester in order to give you late game value with a ton of cheap dragons, because if you lose tempo with this deck or you're not able to finish them off quickly, usually Murlocs would fall off, but Lady Prester just gives you a little bit of extra late game. The card that I put in, the new new card was obviously Cookie the Cook. He's the new Murloc, legendary for Shaman, and he's a 3-mana 2/3, which is a little bit slow, but when he dies, you get a weapon. It's essentially 6 damage guaranteed, which can be very good in an aggressive deck like this. So even though Cookie the Cook himself is a little bit slow, you already have a ton of 2-drops, so it shouldn't actually feel that bad. I ended up taking out both of my Far Watch posts to put in Cookie the Cook and 1 Peasant because, again, Far Watch posts just feel kind of awkward to me in a very aggressive deck like this. Like, they do work sometimes. Like in Quest Priest, I think it's still fine. But in a deck like this, where you want to be very aggressive and have all of your minions pushing damage, I felt like it was a little bit weak. So I ended up putting in Peasant because this deck desperately needs draw and 1-drops because you only really have these 2 1-drops and you need the early game tempo for Murlocs to work. You could potentially take Peasant out and put in Prize Vendor so you can still keep that Murloc synergy and the draw, but it's up to you. I personally like the Peasant a lot because it requires the opponent to answer it, which can put them in an awkward position. So the next deck on this list is Deathrattle Priest, which is a deck I'm personally very excited for. This deck is basically just controlled Priest with Deathrattle minions and N'Zoth as your main win condition. So let's explain how the win condition works first. Amulet of Undying is a new card that resurrects 1 friendly Deathrattle minion and it upgrades every time it's traded. So ideally, throughout the course of a game, and it'll probably take a while, you'll upgrade this at least 1 time and you'll resurrect 2 Deathrattle minions. All of your Deathrattle minions are going to be 6 or more in cost, which is quite strong, and then you have N'Zoth to bring them all back to life. The only problem is Solmir sometimes could mess this combo up, but it's good enough removal to where I think it's pretty worth it. And that brings me to the removal portion. You've got Desperate Prayer with Zyrel, you've got Hysteria, you've got Palm Reading, Venomous Scorpion, Pandaren Importer to find more stuff, Against All Odds with a Wave of Apathy, Solmir, Wave of Apathy just to stall out for a turn if needed, and then you have the Draconic Studies to just help you find a dragon to get you out of a sticky situation and maybe make the Plague Proto-Drake free, or 1 less. The only thing I might change is I might put in the Dragon Stalker over the Plagued Proto-Drake because having this many 8-drop minions does feel a little bit greedy to me, but I'm going to run with the greedier version of the build first just to test it out, and also if I can play the Draconic Studies and then play the Plagued Proto-Drake for 7, it actually helps the curve quite a bit. And the last deck on this list for now is Beast Hunter, running the new pirate card Defias Blastfisher. Basically, the idea of this deck is to get a ton of pumped up Wolpertingers and summon them as many times as you possibly can. I also threw in a Zixer for some potential late game, and then you want to play the Defias Blastfisher to do as much damage as possible, right? If you're able to get out a couple of Wolpertingers for 1 mana, let's just say hypothetically they are like 6/5s, right? Because you're going to play Wolpertinger, you're going to give them +3/+3, put them back into your deck, then you're going to draw 1 or 2 of them off of a Warsong Wrangler. Next thing you know, there's 6/5s. You play like a 6/5, a 6/5, and then the Defias Blastfisher for 7 mana on turn 7. Next thing you know, you're doing 8 random damage and you have a giant board. It's a pretty sick deck, or at least it looks like it will be. It does require some combos. There are some cards that I'm kind of iffy about, like Ramming Mount, but I do think that it'll be pretty good. But if you want to take it out and run something different to help you out of a sticky situation, like a Tame Beast or some sort of removal like a Quick Shot or something, that would also be fine. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I'm really excited to try out a lot of these decks. I hope you guys are too. And if there are any other decks you want me to play, please let me know in the comments because I'd be more than happy to try them out and experiment a little bit.